This is Cheers, the board game. I'm actually pretty excited about this episode. As it happens, I wasn't even hunting for this game, but I happened to receive it as a gift. It's from 1992, and the version I got had been opened but never played. So all the internal components were still in packaging. The outside shrink wrap had been removed. So obviously it had been looked at, but never played. So it weathered extremely nicely over 30 plus years. And I gotta say, right away when I opened it up, before even reading the rules, simply the game board caught my eye, and it probably catches yours if you're a fan of the show Cheers. This is probably one of the most faithful recreations of the set of a TV show that I've seen on a board game. One of the other ones was Golden Girls Clue, which had a pretty good recreation of the condo, but this is a great recreation of the bar. So before we get too far into this, like I said, it was produced by Classic Games. I couldn't find any information on the actual designer, and that's too bad. If you know who designed this game, have them pipe up, because I think that this is one of the more interesting licensed board games that I've come across in a long time. It's nothing too groundbreaking, but it's well-balanced fun and great fan service. Now, right away when we look at the box, that fan service comes through. This is pulled right from the intro credits for Cheers. So you have the show's logo, you have the vintage photographs that were used in the montage for the intro, which, by the way, I want to say, this box is plastered with all of those photos. Not only do you have it on all four sides here and the front, but when you remove the lid, the inside slider for the box also has those photos without the Cheers branding on it. So you get a clear visual. I mean, you can pretty much hear the theme song when you're looking at this box. Now, the other thing is you flip it over, you get a good close up of the game and its components and a basic idea what the game's going to be like, because you see that it's trivia cards, but no real description. So when we open up the box, we have a little cardboard divider and this sleeve for the cards. Now, unfortunately, there's not a great place to stow this spinner, so it sort of floats. And then we have this quarter fold board here. Now, the box has ample storage room for all of the game's components, regardless of if it's a little bit awkward to find a place for the spinner. So I thought that was really nice. When we actually focus on the board and the game components, for 1992, this is some pretty premium stuff. About my only complaint would be these little score trackers here. So the object of the game is for players to navigate their way around the bar. They take the role of one of many characters from the cast of Cheers. We've got Sam, who starts in his office. We've got Fraser and Lilith. We have Carla. We have Rebecca. We've got Woody. And then, of course, we've got Cliff and Norm, the barflies that everybody loves. In fact, Cliff and Norm have a huge effect on this game, as players will have to answer Cliffisms and Normisms. So as they make their way around this map, you'll notice there are these little squares with N's or C's. If they land on one with a C, they have to listen to a Cliffism, a quote that sounds like something that Cliff Clavin would have said on the show, and they'll have to answer yes or no as to whether or not it was a Cliffism that actually was on the show. So for instance, it's a little known fact, when handwriting contains a haphazard mix of capital and lowercase letters, it was most likely written by a man. Was that something that Cliff Clavin said on the show? The correct answer is no. Now, if you had guessed correctly, you get a wooden nickel that matches the color of the square that you're on. The goal being to collect all four colors of wooden nickels. Now, there are C's and N's of each color around here, and normisms are a different type of question. So players can navigate to either a Cliffism or a normism so long as they get that color of wooden nickel. So for instance, a normism might work for somebody who is more a fan of Norm or this type of question, where it'll have a quote from Norm and it'll leave one or two words out and you have to fill in the blank. So for instance, "Hi, Mr. Peterson, got room for a beer?" "No, but I'm willing to blank." The answer is add on. So it's no, but I'm willing to add on. So there are a number of quotes from Norm, but all of these are actual quotes that Norm had in the show. The thing that makes it tough is, as you heard, sometimes in order to set up the quote, you have both sides of it. So obviously I had read something that either Woody or Coach would have set Norm up to say, which can be a little bit confusing, but without that context, the normisms don't make sense. However, that being said, it's really fun to try to determine whether or not a quote from Cliff Clavin is correct, or if you can figure out how to fill in the blank on a normism. So you kind of get to select your difficulty, except for in one instance, no male characters can enter the ladies' room and no female characters can enter the men's room. And you'll notice in the men's room is a normism, and in the ladies' room is a cliffism. And that's the only way to get the purple uh, wooden nickel here. So there's only one time where the ladies or gentlemen get an advantage, depending on which type of question you find easier. Personally, I found normisms to be a little bit tougher, just because you have to really be on the ball with those quotes. Cliffism, you have like a 50-50 chance. Norm, you have to fill in the blank and know what he said. Now, that being said, navigation of the board is also a trivia game unto itself with a wacky twist. So players will start off in a starting space. Like I have Rebecca here has a purple space amongst the tables because she'll be waiting tables. And if I was playing as Rebecca, I'd take this spinner and I spin it. Oh, let's get a better spin than that. There we go. It's not so bad of a spinner, but there's not really much to flick on this thing. It's sort of an El Cheapo, and you'll notice it has these little colored wedges along with the number section. So let's say hypothetically that I had spun this 6 and landed on green. I would move Rebecca 6 spaces, and as I'm navigating, there are things like fast travel points, like go to exit, which is within 4. She can navigate forward, backward, or diagonally. So, I mean, any player can do that. So its locomotion is pretty easy, and you'll get why that is. But there are these little spots here that have things like go to the men's room, go to the exit, that'll jump you around the bar faster. There are also things called Carla's Dare. So if you land on Carla's Dare, there's a dynamic where you get to dare a player to do something, and if they do it, they get a free turn. Now, the free turn has to be spent within one turn of getting it, and it's kind of a weird dynamic because the couple times I played this, I never did Carla's Dare to get a free turn. I think it's more of an excuse to make this a party game, and you'll see how that unfolds as we play. However, I've rolled a spun, a 6, and it's green. So then what I would do is after moving 6 spaces, and if I go to like one of these fast travels, I just move to where it says and stay there and wait for the question. Now, the questions are printed in a corresponding color to what's on the spinning wheel. So I will read off the green question, and all of these are multiple choice. So when the liquor license at Cheers was not renewed, how did Rebecca mitigate the situation? Did she A, temporarily close the bar, B, serve non-alcoholic beer and soft drinks, or C, told everyone that Gary's was having 5-cent beers? Now you get to guess, and the answer for that one is B. She served non-alcoholic beer and soft drinks. So the nice thing is you have pretty much a 30% shot of getting it right, even if you're not a super fan of the show and don't know what episode they're talking about, which I think is really nice because you get to play a themed game, but it's not super elitist to the super fans are not always going to win. There's always margin for error, but some people who don't watch every episode of the show, having that 30% shot makes it pretty fun. So you get a little bit of an advantage being a fan, but it's not going to ruin the game if you've only watched a few episodes and maybe recall some fondly. So especially since the show has been on reruns and streaming for a long time, this was actually way easier for me to play. And I imagine that in 1992, when we didn't have those options and you just had to catch an episode on the air, this game was probably pretty tough. Now, the other thing that I found interesting was on these trivia cards, it's not always going to be 3 trivia questions. Sometimes the action that corresponds to your color tells you have to go to a location if you're playing a specific character, which I thought was hilarious because there were times where I was playing and one character and my character had navigated almost to where we wanted to be to get our normism or cliffism to win. And through an unlucky spin, the other player got a thing that said, move this character here and this character here because they had a bad interaction. It happened to be the characters we were playing, and it exactly reversed everything we had done to navigate for like the last couple turns. Now, if you answer the trivia question correctly, you get to keep going. So it's also a press your luck. Even if you don't know all the answers, you get that 30% chance to keep going. Now, for me, I would say I probably recall like maybe a third of the show. I mean, it's an 11-year run, okay? There's a lot there. In fact, we were watching it on streaming while we were playtesting this game, so it was funny watching answers pop up. But that being said, it felt very fair. You get a couple chances to move around. If you get the trivia question wrong, you stop there, wait for your next turn. If you get it right, you get to spin again. Once you get to your normism and cliffism, if you get it right, you get to collect your wooden nickel. If you get it wrong, you have to wait for your next turn. So, I mean, it ends the turn at reasonable points as you're moving around. Nobody's going to be able to dominate the game by answering every trivia question right. So that's the other nice thing is the trivia is not such, the way that the trivia is integrated into the game, I should say, is not such that somebody will be able to play their turn indefinitely if they happen to have an intimate knowledge of the source material. So that was really nice, particularly because the game focuses on one television show, and it does that beautifully. I love the fact that all the characters start where they would in the show on the set. This is the fourth wall. This is why I arranged this for you, is if you were watching the show, this would be the fourth wall where the camera was aimed in, and everything orients thusly. Now, I did notice that, and maybe this is something that happened in the later seasons, but the piano was moved. It seems to be switched between where the TV is. So I was watching some earlier episodes, and I noticed that the piano was actually where the TV was situated, and there was no TV in the earlier stuff. So I think they might have moved that around in later seasons. But other than that, this was such a surprising one-to-one representation of the bar. And yes, with all the squares, it looks daunting, but once you look at how easy it is to answer some trivia questions and move as far as you need to, even just to get to one of the various shortcuts, because sometimes you move a shortcut or daisy chain some shortcuts to get around to whichever normism. Oh, I almost dropped Rebecca. I almost dropped Rebecca into my lap. Uh, once you when you're navigating for the normisms or cliffisms to get your wooden nickels, it's pretty easy to daisy chain a lot of the little shortcuts and everything to get around the map. So even though it looks like there are quite a few tiny squares, it's really easy to move around. I thought this was great fan service. I also want to point out, so when we look at the rules, we got this nice thick piece of cardstock. It's I should say lighter. It's rigid, but not super bad here. So, but it's right around what I would call cardstock. We've got a fold over here, kind of like a greeting card. So not like a booklet so much, but like a greeting card, which I thought was kind of interesting there. Also, the instructions are written very conversationally. So I don't know how to put this, but they definitely feel like you should be having a beer with your friends when you're playing this game. And I tend to agree. This is not too complicated that anybody's... I think the game looks complicated at first glance if you're not a big board gamer, but it's actually really easy, and it's easy enough that, yes, you could have a beer and pretzels and enjoy it with your friends and not get lost and have fun with the trivia. The only place I did think you could get lost was actually in the instructions, because the conversational nature of it is such that you'd never want to actually try to read this out loud to a group of people. You'd want to read this and then tell them how to play, which is kind of what we needed to do, because just trying to read aloud was a bit of a mess. It was a fun read. And actually, I do want to point out, they were cheeky enough that right down here by all the branding, they say bonus points if you notice that the airplane on the front is upside down. So there's a little airplane on the rule book, and they just kind of threw that in as an Easter egg. So again, their attention to detail was really good. This is why I would love it if the designer would take credit, because the way that they integrated Carla's dares in here to add a sort of exciting party element to the game. Like I said, when I was playing with my friends, we never did a Carla's dare, but a Carla's dare will get you an extra turn and gives you an opportunity to do an outside of the game dare with somebody, pretty simple, like truth or dare, to get a game piece, which I thought was a fun little dynamic that didn't upend the game either, because you get this free turn token, you have to use it at least on your next turn. So they don't want you like trying to stockpile them or anything like that. Pretty basic tame stuff. You're not going to be doing, there's nothing pre-written or anything like that. So you're not going to be doing anything wild when you're playing a board game, but it's just enough to instigate that extra little interaction around the table. And I thought that was great. Overall, the quality of the components are pretty decent. I mean, the pawns are hollow plastic, but they're nice and thick and chunky and easy to move around. They're a little bit larger in footprint than the squares. So, I mean, the board is a decent size. I'm not going to complain about the amount of real estate. Any bigger than this would feel like a table hog, and I feel like any smaller of the pawns, they'd be too difficult to handle. But you can have two pawns right next to each other. It's not going to interrupt, and it's not the type of game where having them slightly misaligned is going to be a huge issue. It's predominantly a trivia game with the fun map that you get to play on. I was actually joking that because you have all these characters in their own starting positions, just like the show, in a humorous way, it reminded me of Hero Quest. I was just like, oh, you get to play Tavern Quest with the Cheers cast. How fun. I love that the cliffisms and normisms look like coasters. That was just, the whole motif is great. Collecting wooden nickels. I wish the wooden nickels were more substantial. They're kind of a thinner cardboard. They don't need to be more substantial, but it would be nice just for the tactile pleasure of the game. But you have the little colored ring around the center that lets you know which one of the 4 colors you've collected. They're of the same material of the free turn ones that have the little Indian head. Looks like the wooden Indian that they had at the front of the bar in the series, which I was surprised at how many Kiss the Wooden Indian spots there were around here. I also want to point out the couch is a landmark in this game. Yeah, that's my. I was somewhat endeared to Cheers the game, as the couch is a very important part. Gotta love it. Gotta love it. Now, this is a blast. The questions, be it that they were multiple choice or would at random have something that you had to do quick that shook up the game, was a lot of fun. I did find one card that I thought was interesting. So this is the red question here. What is the only situation comedy spinoff of Cheers? Is it A, Erie, Indiana, B, the Tortellis, or C, Cliff's Place? Now, that's a tough one because the most famous spinoff, which was a sitcom, was Frasier, and that ran 11 years from 1993 to 2004. So both Cheers and Frasier ran 11 years. So there are a lot of people who are probably going to be confused at the fact that this trivia question's correct answer is the Tortellis, which was a 13-episode single season, I think an incomplete season even, series that focused on Carla, the waitress's ex-husband. So he was a returning kind of he was a character that appeared and disappeared throughout the series as kind of a shakeup. Carla hated him, and they made sort of a dysfunctional family sitcom called The Tortellis in 1987. Like I said, 13 episodes. I don't even think it ran a full season. And so I kind of had a giggle. It reminded me of Trivial Pursuit having outdated questions. So be it that we were only 1 year out. That's the funny thing is Frasier started in 93 and the last episode of Cheers aired in 93. So the spinoff just kind of dovetailed right on to the end of the series, which I find fascinating. I guess I didn't realize that right out of the gate. Actually, I thought Frasier was out a little bit later. I thought the difference was greater, but no, it was only like a year difference. So all the trivia for this was probably gathered and compiled and set together here, easily in 91 before any of this went into production, 1990 or 91. So there might even be trivia missing from the last 2 seasons of Cheers. We don't know. But I found all the trivia to be interesting. It was fun watching reruns on streaming while playing this as well. It really put us in the mood. I like the color palette. This really feels like the tavern, like Cheers. It's great. Now, this game is not ranked really high on Board Game Geek, which I don't blame. I mean, one, we're looking at an older game that skews towards an older audience as well, and a specific niche of fans of Cheers. Now, that being said, is it like a perfect nostalgia smart missile for people who enjoy the show? Absolutely. This is one of the most fun licensed games that I've ever played. If you are not a big Cheers aficionado, I can 100% understand why this would have limited draw for you. But if you are a fan of Cheers, this is a great game. It supports up to 8 players. So that was another thing that I thought was really surprising, was when it is a party game. I guess I really would call it a party game. It's a hair heavier weight than just regular Trivial Pursuit, but only because you have the variations like Carla's Dare for the free turns, and some of the ways that you move around the board, but you're still answering, a cliffism or a normism to get essentially your pie piece, of which there's only 4. So now it's only 4 wooden nickels. But overall, the game does have enough interaction around the table outside of the game itself. It permits that. It encourages that. That I would say that, yeah, this would qualify as a party game. Definitely a party game I'd bring out for a very specific crowd. But if I was playing like themed games, 100%, it'd be great to pair this up with like Golden Girls Clue. In fact, let me know what you would pair this with. If you have a licensed game that you really like that you think that this would match, absolutely, I think it would be great to hear about. But I admire how simple but fun the art is. There are a few curiosities, like this giant lady here in the corner by the piano. I'm not sure what the deal is because they have some people, some patrons at the tables having their food and drink, and they look a little bit smaller than this gal here. She's the only person I see depicted standing up, and the wooden Indian looks pretty gigantic too. But I think that's just sort of the forced perspective. And it was neat seeing the fourth wall, the perspective where the cameras would come from. But everything was laid out beautifully. Like as soon as I opened this, I was just going, "Wow, this looks so much like the bar. This is so fun." So again, let me know what licensed games that you think were great. I'd love to hear about it in the comments section. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. If you had a good time, make sure that you like and subscribe. Thanks to my couch potatoes for making episodes like this possible. I can't wait to share more nostalgic finds with you in the future. We'll see you next time.